Because of the shocking nature of many scenes in this film, it is definitely not recommended for the squeamish.
Warning. This presentation will contain some stomach-upsetting information, and probably to your entire molecular structure. Prepare to change your underwear.
To pull off the murder of Malcolm X successfully, the Nation of Islam had to first come up with an ingenious plan to get into the ballroom. The Ticketron pay-per-view affairs given by Mosque No. 7 were front-row assassination rehearsals that would start right inside the ballroom that the Nation of Islam would rent out. The plan that they came up with was based on the mythical Trojan horse legend. The Nation of Islam would double up on the myth and put a twisted spin on it that would gain them entry into the Autobahn ballroom, where a lieutenant named Linwood X would distract Malcolm's followers. All that was needed now was a guarantee that everyone would be in their proper places. Lieutenant Linwood X handpicks his team of men that will take care of Malcolm X. William Bradley, Talmadge Hayer, Albert Benjamin Thomas, John Kinley, also known as Wilbur McKinley, Leon Davis, and Clarence Hill. They're ready. They've rehearsed it for months. And now it's time to take out their target. William Bradley will be the lead shooter who will fire the first blast from his sawed-off shotgun. Lieutenant Linwood X could always rely on Bradley when serious enforcement had to be carried out. If Bradley was successful in this most important mission, he'd be set for life. Being deprived night after night from getting a good night's rest and trying to stay alert from non-stop death threats and physical attacks, Malcolm is forced to start dangerously dabbling with over-the-counter sleeping aids.
So don't spend another sleepless night counting sheep. Take Sominex as directed for 100% safe sleep. No prescription needed. Money back if not satisfied. Get Sominex at your drugstore now.
But the over-the-counter sleeping aids did not put Malcolm in the deep sleep he really wanted. He would have to step it up and get a doctor to inject a more powerful sedative. What a price to pay fighting for 22 million Afro-Americans' freedom. When Malcolm's house was firebombed, Malcolm stated that he saw someone running through the house and that the pistol that he fired didn't go off. What if the pistol did fire and he hit a family member accidentally? Malcolm was so doped up the night of the house bombing, he could barely see straight. In the book, Malcolm X, The Man and His Times, edited by John Henry Clark, in the chapter, The Last Days of Malcolm X, on page 85, Earl Grant writes this: Brother Malcolm began to describe the evening. He said he had been more tired than usual and had taken a sleeping pill so as to get some rest. Without being disrespectful, I completely lost my temper. I asked him if he knew what he had done. That if he wanted to sleep that deeply, he could have called me first, and some of us brothers would have come out and stood guard around his house all night. He looked down at me with that big fatherly smile of his, and I just gave up and walked off, mumbling to myself. Droggy from sedatives, Malcolm keeps his speaking engagement at the Ford Auditorium in Detroit on February 14, 1965. The bodyguard of Muhammad Ali, Clarence X. Gill, is appointed to take charge of the war against Malcolm X because of the lack of action to punish Malcolm by members of New York's Mosque No. 7. Clarence Gill is from the Boston Mosque. He is also a captain under Louis X. Arriving at Mosque No. 25 in Newark, New Jersey on February 21st, 1965 are the two Bostonians, Clarence X. Gill
and Louis X. You know, when Elijah Muhammad's ministers and his staff, when they killed Malcolm, they showed no remorse before Malcolm even hit the stage floor. You know, maybe Elijah Muhammad should have said something, and all his ministers should have said something positive about Malcolm the day he was gunned down. Instead, they made mockery before the brother even hit the stage floor. Let me show you what I mean. Let me show you a scene from one of these movies. This movie, Crazy Joe, starring Eli Wallach and Peter Boyle and Fred Williamson. Let me play it for you so you can see what I'm talking about. Yeah, these are some of my favorites. Kiss Me Deadly, Training Day, Midnight Run, Boss of Bosses, Menace to Society, A Bronx Tale, American Gangster, this is one of my favorites. Gotti, The Godfather, of course. Goodfellas. Where's Donnie Brasco? I'm surprised Donnie Brasco's not in this group. I must have put it somewhere. Hoodlum, and this is the one I'm talking about. Crazy Joe. Crazy Joe. That's the one I'm talking about. Let's play a scene from Crazy Joe.
We can do some good work here. We've got a hospital going and a camp.
Vince?
You go back to running your businesses. We'll find somebody else clean to take over this Federation thing. But you finish it. I tell you this for your own good.
Joe, listen, I wasn't kidding, man. I can put some pretty good people together, handle any kind of heavy work. Now, if you haven't changed your mind by the time you get out, I want to make you a move. I'm with you.
You better think about it. Because if I make my move and you're with me, you're going to go up against all the New York families. And how's it going to look to your own people doing business with the O-Face?
It'll look just fine as long as they get their share of the pie.
Vittorio Santoni, accompanied by his lawyer, is now entering the police station to make his deposition. Mr. Santoni is reputedly the most powerful New York City mobster, and by many considered the boss of bosses.
Get your hands off of me, you big idiot. You too, Buster.
All right, now, take it easy.
What's your name? Marco Magruder.
6 Bullet Starter, 1 to KTH.
You had no right to arrest me.
Right.
I got some
Over Santoni. Come with me.
Hurry up and up when they hear about this.
Joe. Oh, it's terrible. It's like someone hurt my only son. But qué cosas. What a man, like a saint. Such good work he was doing in the name of all Italians.
You see the difference? Did you hear what that mob boss said? Oh, he was like a son to me. What a great loss. Instead, what do we get? Was Malcolm your traitor? We dealt with him like a nation deals with a traitor. Elijah Muhammad was no different. He set the tone for all that smack talk. Here he first admits that he was scared of rifles, and then he goes all in on Brother Malcolm. Listen.
Mr. Muhammad, could you tell us what happened between you and Malcolm X? What was the point of disagreement, sir?
The most of our disagreement was Malcolm wanted to use arms.
Use what?
He wanted to use arms, and I disagreed with him because we have always, for many years now, it's 34 years now, we never resorted to arms. And in fact about it, God reminded me of that time and again, to never to pick up arms against no one. Way I see it, Malcolm is the victim of his own preaching. He preached violence, and so he became the victim of it.
So Malcolm met with just what he preached. This death of Malcolm, God himself had something to do with that. And
I think the people will learn that this was some work of God himself.
Oh, come on, man. God had something to do with Brother Malcolm's death? A warrior like Malcolm? If I saw that God, I'd smack him in his damn mouth. Is this what y'all were teaching, that God took out Brother Malcolm and didn't take out no white man? Ah, man, I'm convinced this thing was bogus. I'm convinced this was some bullshit. I hate to say it, and it bothers me to say this, but the Nation of Islam of 1965, under the leadership of Elijah Muhammad, betrayed the Black Revolution. If I accidentally ate a whole box of laxative and had to go to the bathroom and my stomach was about to explode, I'd rather shit on myself than to ask one of Malcolm's killers, where's the key to the toilet? I'm not making any of this up. Men and women who were close to Malcolm told me how foul Malcolm was treated by the Nation of Islam's leadership. Here's two brothers that I knew personally for over 30 years. They were with Malcolm. Here's Brother Earl Grant explaining what he saw the day Malcolm was executed in a plot conducted by the New York City Police Department, the CIA, FBI, and the Nation of Islam, which was carried out to stop Malcolm from presenting the case for reparations before the United Nations, a case which Malcolm would have easily won.
I was in the phone booth when I heard the first shot, and then there were some more shots, and then here come all these people just pouring out the door. And this guy later identified as Hare, or whatever his name is. He was running out, still had the gun in his hand. And a bunch of people were kicking him and knocking him until they finally knocked him down, and they were kicking him all in the face and chest and everything. And as I remember him, he looked like a zombie. His eyes were bulging, like he was either high on something or he'd been hypnotized. I don't know what was wrong with him, but he just looked like a zombie, and he never let out a sound. And they were about to kick his chest in, and there was no outcry of pain or anything. He looked like a robot.
Let's take a close examination of the footage shot outside the Audubon Ballroom, where Thomas Hare, the one Earl Grant described as a zombie, is being pounced on by Malcolm's followers. Again, here's the footage in real time, and we are going to freeze some of the frames to show you something very strange going on by the shotgun shooter, William Bradley, that an arrow will point to. Follow the man with the red arrow pointing at him. He has a copy of Muhammad Speaks newspaper in his pocket, used to signal to the planners of this murder that he is one of their participants, who is not to be arrested or interfered with. If you take a close look at this freeze frame, you'll notice that the man who shot Malcolm using a sawed-off shotgun, instead of fleeing the crime scene, is still present. That's how much confidence he had. He knew the police were there to protect him. Observe that he has something in his hand that resembles a belt made of cloth, again in real time, without any arrows blocking your vision. Keep your eyes on the man with the Muhammad Speaks newspaper in his pocket and watch him remove from his captured cohort what appears to be a cloth belt. He tucks the cloth item into his overcoat as if to conceal it, and then he walks off screen. Brother Earl was right about that assassin looking like a robot and zombie. He was bugged out of his mind from smoking dope. That's why he behaved the way he did when he was getting beat senseless. That nigga was out of his mind.
He was running out, still had the gun in his hand. And a bunch of people were kicking him and knocking him until they finally knocked him down, and they were kicking him all in the face and chest and everything. And as I remember him, he looked like a zombie. His eyes were bulging, like he was either high on something or he'd been hypnotized. I don't know what was wrong with him, but he just looked like a zombie. He never let out a sound. and they were about to kick his chest in, and there was no outcry of pain or anything. He looked like a robot.
The history of drugs being used by assassins goes way back in ancient times. Assassins would smoke hashish before missions in order to remain cool and calm and boost their strength and turn them into madmen in battle. These assassins were called the Hashashins, and they were the most feared in the ancient world. The Fruit of Islam of 1965 were also feared, but the only people who were afraid of them were members of their own race. They didn't scare any white people. All the brutality they ever engaged in was on their own people. They had no track record of waging war on white individuals or groups. And now, in 2023, everyone seems to appear to adopt the same methods of the Fruit of Islam of 1965. It's a complete disgrace that Brother Tyree Nichols had to have his funeral in the beginning of Black History Month of 2023. And Linwood, you're no hero among black people, and you know it. It was very cowardly of you to walk into the ballroom with your team of assassins. Hold on, I take that back. You and your team of killers didn't walk into the ballroom. I was told y'all bopped into the ballroom with a confident Denzel Washington type of bop. I heard you had a toothpick in your mouth and was spitting 5-foot straight streams of spit between a gap in your 2 front teeth. I also heard that William Bradley might have dished off that belt to you. The Nation of Islam of 1965 betrayed the Black Revolution when y'all took out Brother Malcolm.
Was the assassination a conspiracy concocted by the Nation of Islam? This is a good question. Okay. The way that I got involved in the case, as I said earlier, was because of the conflict between Malcolm and Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and there were certain statements that Malcolm had made in regards to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Accusations that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had fathered children by other women, things like this here. A lot of other statements that was being made. And most of the Muslims at the time just actually felt that Malcolm was slandering the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that he was defaming him, that he was lying, you know. And this led to me really getting involved because as I had stated in my own affidavit to the court in regards to the innocence of the other 2 brothers, I stated in that affidavit how I had got involved in the case and how I was approached in the first place by 2 brothers. I gave their names.
You were recruited, were you not?
I guess you could say yes, I was. I was approached by 2 brothers, brothers that I knew. I was in the Nation of Islam at the time. They were in the Nation of Islam at that time. They pretty much knew what my feelings was in regards to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I had a lot of respect, a lot of love for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I had, no idea really at the time of the validity of what Malcolm was saying, some of the things that he was saying. And I, like most other Muslims at that time, we were referred to as, Black Muslims back in those days. And most of us felt that Malcolm was just outright lying. So when I was approached in regards to it, and I was asked my feelings in regards to it, I said I thought it was bad. I thought it was just, this is a disgrace.
What happened on that day, February 21st, 1965?
That morning, and I would say really the night before, me and the other individuals that I mentioned, we had decided that we was going to move on Malcolm. We was going to kill him if we possibly could on the 21st. And we drew up a strategy, how we was going to go into the ballroom, where we was going to sit, and what we was going to do. And knowing that there would be a crowd there, we figured that it's a possibility that we could do it. That's what we did.
What was that strategy, and what did you do?
Basically, it was for us to first make sure that there would be no searching. So the first of us to approach the door would know that if indeed someone was to search, we would just turn around and we would not enter. But on approaching the ballroom, no one searched. So this meant that we could go right in. We are all from out of town. Most of the people didn't recognize us anyway. So we just came in as regular people interested in the program. And our strategy was basically for me and the other brother named to sit down front. The ballroom was broken up into different sections. We sat on the left-hand side in the front. Brother named myself, right in the front row. There was two brothers sitting behind me. And brother, I had a .45, the Luger, the sort of shotgun. And our strategy was, as soon as the minister came out to speak, as soon as he opened up his speech, that would fire the shotgun. That myself, we would fire our guns in the direction of Malcolm. And this is exactly what we did. With that, there was another individual who sat in the back. His name was... His thing was to cause a distraction. Right at the time of when the minister was getting ready to open up, he accused someone of going into his pocket. And at the same, around the same time, he threw a smoke bomb to cause a little distraction, right? And basically, this is what we did. So we went in, and we did just that.
You seem to be different now. Have you really changed?
I would have to say yes, I've changed. I don't know if anyone could understand. When you have religious convictions and you base them on certain things, and then you have to change that. I've changed simply because our whole, the whole nation of Islam has gone through a whole transition with the leadership of the Honorable Wallace D. Muhammad, who really, I would say, is responsible for my changing. Because when he came into office as leader of this community, and he said certain things in regards to his father, I realized then that, in truth, that many of us really worshiped the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We looked at him as if he was some kind of a god, And his son broke you down and explained him as, my father is only a man like any other man. He explained that his father had weaknesses, just like any other man might have weaknesses. And he even said that his father had fathered some children by other women. Now, when I heard that, I can only describe it as, if you can imagine taking a piece of clay that has to be balled up and made all over again. I had really, it really balled me up, and I had to really do some deep thinking on that, because I always felt that the truth would be known in regards to Malcolm. But for a long time, I felt that Malcolm was really lying, that Malcolm was really wrong, you see. And I always felt that the truth someday would come out. But I never really believed that at that time that it would come out that Malcolm was really speaking truth. So with the changes that came about in the Nation of Islam, with the leadership of the Honorable Wallace D. Muhammad, well, I had to change too.
Hayer's naming of his co-conspirators now even stirs up the tempest further. He says he's not sure who above him in the Muslims gave the order, or if indeed it was the Muslims.
Do you believe that you were used, that your deep devotion for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was used to manipulate you?
It's possible. It's possible. At the time, no one could convince me that that was the case, but I realize now that it's possible. It's very possible that I could have been a pawn. It's very possible that someone just knew I was a good candidate to, do this, and I could have been manipulated. It's hard for me to say. I couldn't say who may have done this. I really couldn't tell you who handed down the order to move on Malcolm. I really couldn't tell you. All I could tell you as much as I have told you now. I was approached. Somebody approached the people who approached me. You know, I can't say who approached them.
But did he tell us enough? Did he tell us the whole story? I'm sure you've noticed that in this interview, he appeared to be cool, calm, and very relaxed. But in the interview he did with Gil Noble, his composure was different. It's because he knew that talk show host Gil Noble was a die-hard admirer of Brother Malcolm. Heyer was very nervous. His mouth started getting dry. Observe.
He was really declared a hypocrite at the time. And because of some of the things that he was saying in regards to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, may God be pleased with him, a strong position was really taken against him. The ministers began to speak out against the things that Malcolm was saying in regards to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, accusations that he had made about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He had accused the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, for instance, of fathering children and etc. And you must understand that at that time, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to the Muslims then, was held in such high reverence as you would even think of any prophet being held in high reverence. And this is the kind of love and admiration that Muslims at that time had for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So when Minister Malcolm began to say those things, it was taken as an outright lie. And that he was actually castigating and defaming, actually, the messenger. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was known at that time as the messenger of God. That was the title he used. And for those who followed him, that is what he was accepted as at that time.
If I could interview Tommy Heyer and Linwood X. Cathcart, they'd break out in a cold sweat because I'd ask some real tough questions. Like the time I was a wild teen and I was picked up by some detectives and brought to a police precinct for some stupid shit that I did. I was being questioned by a detective who I thought was soft. I wasn't cooperating. And then another detective came over to the desk. And I'm telling you, this guy was no joke. He was a tough, burly Irish detective. And you can see the wisdom written on his face, that over the years, he heard a lot of bullshit and could read you like a book. He resembled that actor, Charles McGraw. You've seen actor Charles McGraw mostly in those black and white gangster movies. He played a tough detective in many movies. The Narrow Margin, Loophole, Roadblock, Armored Car Robbery. Hollywood cast him right. One of those kind of guys with that look in their eyes, that had compassion. I was fortunate to meet some black men like that. Give you the shirt off their backs, as long as you didn't chump them off. It was Malcolm's honesty that his fellow Nation of Islam members lacked. And that's what got him in trouble. He was in an organization with a bunch of niggers. And that's what ruined it. Oh, did I get distracted? I gotta stop doing that while I'm doing these narrations. Let me go back to that detective in the precinct that resembled Charles McGraw. Before he even said a word, he gave me that classic bitter, I'm about sick of niggers, vinegary look while he was going down into his chair. And then he started asking me a bunch of questions that I knew I had to answer and sound like I was telling the truth. He asked me if I had any nicknames. And with every silly nickname I told him, like Ace, Slick, and Smooth, none of which I owned in the ghetto and were only figments of my imagination, but I was dumb enough to believe that these jive names were giving me some clout simultaneously in both of our minds. I wasn't even smart enough to realize that he was intelligence gathering right on the spot, because all those stupid titles I gave him, he wrote them all down to be put in the database. He asked me if I had any hobbies. And I think I told him I had a 30-gallon fish tank, but I really only had a 5-gallon tank with a turtle in it I always forgot to feed, who died after 3 months of owning him. I also lied about another hobby, drawing. And I told him I once won some prize money by drawing some figures I saw in a magazine ad. But I didn't tell him that I won because I traced. But I knew he could see through the bullshit. But when he started asking me questions about why I was actually in the precinct for, that's when my composure started to change. He didn't like my answers. And he said to me, "You're lying." And I slid back in the seat and pretended I took exception to what he said. And he said in a calm tone, "If you aren't lying, then why do you have cotton mouth?" And I said, "Cotton mouth? What's that?" And that's when he went medical on me. Cotton mouth is when the inside of your mouth gets as dry as cotton, medically known as extrarostomia. It occurs when you can't produce enough saliva. You can get cotton mouth naturally, or when you are extremely nervous. It can make talking or swallowing difficult. Needless to say, I was busted. After many years of behaving like a professional knucklehead, I started hearing the voices of Gil Scott-Heron, the last poets, and then I started thinking in the right direction, as opposed to continuing to walk around without an operator's manual, instruction book, or owner's manual. I joined the Nation of Islam because they appeared to have an army ready to fight white supremacists who were constantly dogging our people around. I heard about the army they had, called the Fruit of Islam, who knew how to disarm people with pistols, take down police dogs that were biting our people. I heard about them training to use hand-to-hand combat techniques. I figured this is what our folks needed to stop the hand of our oppressor. So I was like, where do I sign? I heard about this guy Malcolm, and word was that he was a hypocrite. So completely ignorant about him while I was in the Nation, I started echoing the same thing about him. Later on, I would find out that Malcolm X was nobody's hypocrite at all. But now that I had joined the Nation of Islam, my main focus was waiting on my marching orders, waiting for the word to be given to avenge our people who were being brutalized all over the planet. I wanted to physically take on the racists, the human devils on earth. The proof that our people were being mistreated was no mystery. Nobody had to guess about it. Nobody had to wonder if the hell black people were catching was real. It was right before your eyes. And I, for one, wanted to do something about it, to stop it. I was crushed when I found out the Nation of Islam's army only waged war on black people. I kept hearing stories about Fruit of Islam members coming out of Mosque number 25 in Newark, New Jersey, being the killers of Brother Malcolm, and they were led into the Audubon Ballroom by a lieutenant named Linwood X, said to be an expert swordsman who you had to salute when you entered his office, because he was a bad mother. I'm talking about Linwood. Sitting around with a scowl on your face will never scare the system of oppression. I used to do that back in the day in the hood. I also thought that if I cracked my knuckles before a street fight started, my opponent would run away. Man, that technique never worked. I got my ass kicked so many times, I lost count. And Linwood posing with swords you never intended to use against anyone making black people's lives miserable is just as corny. I thought it was cold and callous when I saw a photo in Muhammad Speaks newspaper dated April 30, 1965, only 2 months after Malcolm's well-planned assassination. 3 officials sitting at a table, laughing it up, grinning, smiling, and beguiling, like it was business as usual. On February 21 of 2008, Shabazz Productions put out a special edition 2-DVD 3-hour and 35-minute documentary titled The Laughing Lieutenant, The Public Execution of Malcolm X. It was inspired by many things mentioned in a well-written 473-page, thick as a telephone book by author Peter Goldman titled The Death and Life of Malcolm X. It was something written on page 269 that shook me to the bone, that mentioned who was barred from entering the Autobahn Ballroom on the day Malcolm was murdered. A Muslim from New Jersey, with a Fruit of Islam pin gleaming in his lapel, somehow slipped through unnoticed and took a seat down front. Somebody in the guard detail finally spotted him and asked him to step to the rear, where a couple of brothers questioned him. He told them he had been getting disillusioned with the nation and its teachings. They asked him to put his FOI pin in his pocket, then let him return to his seat without a search or even special instructions to any of the brothers to keep an eye on him. Life brought up some photos one of the brothers had taken immediately after the shooting stopped. The pictures, when the police got hold of them, identified and placed still more witnesses. One of them showed a known Muslim, the man who had gotten into the hall wearing an FOI pin and was allowed to stay once he took it off. The camera caught him standing there, staring at Malcolm's body. He looked as if he were laughing. A very interesting book that's still available. Ah, so the police have the photos. And you say the Nation of Islam had nothing to do with Malcolm's murder. Let me ask you, did the iron in spinach give Popeye strength? Is a pig's pussy pork? A day after Malcolm was assassinated, on February 22, 1965, the police interviewed Linwood X. Cathcart, and he told the police that Malcolm was compared to Benedict Arnold and was a traitor, and his man guard, Master Farad from Pakistan, took out Brother Malcolm. And our people are supposed to run to you to hear some words of wisdom, consult you as a consigliere, a lieutenant, an imam, a man of higher learning? Nigga, I wouldn't ask you to piss on me if I caught on fire. You've heard the expression, rest in peace. For many, it will be in pieces. And for all you who had a hand in Malcolm's demise, let me say this. All of you who are still alive and already have one foot in the grave, your best bet is to get cremated now. Because when the young warriors find out where your treacherous traitor to the Black Revolution ass is buried, they're gonna pull your bones off and hand them to revolutionary drum corps to replace drumsticks, to beat on their drums in triumph and celebration in a yearly parade of the sellouts among us who thought they got away with their betrayal. And I want to salute all the people I've been blessed to physically run across who have consistently stood for Brother Malcolm without faltering or backing down. You see, you can't scare everybody off. What the Nation of Islam did to Brother Malcolm, along with the system of oppression, was truly treacherous. When Malcolm was prevented from taking our case into the United Nations, we all had and still have a dog in the fight. Linwood, word on the street is that shotgun assassin William Bradley from your mosque in Newark, New Jersey, mosque number 25, ripped off a belt from Thomas Hayer and handed it to you. Please do us a favor and tell us what was in that belt.
Something to remember our adventure by. Jack. This better be good.
This is good. This is very good. When I was making my getaway, I thought the FBI was closing in on me. Take it, take it. I took some traveling money. Take it, take it. It's not a payoff, it's a gift. You already let me go. You son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. I wish I had money. I know you had money. I didn't know you had money. How much is here? Neighborhood of 300,000. It's a very respectable neighborhood. I don't know what to say, John. Take care. Take care. See you in the next life. See you in the next life. See you in the next life.